Hello, everybody. I'm Bernie Goldberg. This is the No BS Zone, and I'm here with my good friend, the Renaissance man of the Rocky Mountains. Don't shake your head. You immodestly shaking his head. Yes, John Daly. How you doing, John?
I'm doing good. I like the new nickname. That's very good, Bernie.
The Renaissance man of the
Yeah,
Rockies.
I'm not sure what all it applies to, but I do like it.
It's not easy being a political commentator these days. You start out, and the big story is the Epstein files. You turn around for 2 seconds, and the big story is Jimmy Kimmel. You go to sleep, you wake up the next day, and it's James Comey's indictment. I have no idea, folks, what the story is, what big story is going to break between when I'm talking to you now and when you're listening to me 24 hours later. I have no idea. It's interesting time to be and difficult time to be a political commentator. Anyway, there's a story in the Wall Street Journal this week about what really happened to Jimmy Kimmel. And the story says that when he was taken off the air by ABC Disney, the head of Disney, Bob Iger, his phone didn't stop ringing. Talent agencies, the powerhouses in Hollywood, were calling and saying their people, their actors, their producers, their talent, they might not work for Disney anymore if they didn't put, because of what he did. And they wanted Jimmy Kimmel back on the air. And then Jimmy Kimmel, after 4 days, was put back on the air. They say that's the whole story. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read you one quote from Disney's general counsel, just one short quotation. Both decisions, he said, both decisions, the preemption and the return, were our own independent editorial decisions based on principles and were not influenced by external voices and pressures, meaning they were not influenced by Brendan Carr and the FCC. I don't believe it. Could be, but I don't believe it. Brendan Carr, the FCC chairman, acted like a New Jersey mob boss when he said Disney, ABC can do it the easy way, or they could do it the hard way. They could take Jimmy Kimmel off the air for what he said, or they can have problems with the FCC. And we're told by the general counsel of Disney that had nothing to do with their decision. I don't believe it. What it comes down to is this. Jimmy Kimmel had no First Amendment rights. ABC could have fired him because of what he said or because they didn't like the color of his tie. But Brendan Carr got involved, sounding like a mafioso guy, making threats. And this is the one sentence takeaway for me. The government cannot coerce, cannot strong arm a private company to do what the government itself cannot do. Meaning, the government couldn't fire Jimmy Kimmel, but they strong armed ABC, Disney to do what the government couldn't do. You can't do that. That's wrong. Now, ABC's, Disney's general counsel says it didn't happen that way. We just took him off the air because there was too much tension, and we put him back on because we were acting on principle. You know what? I'm not in Hollywood. I don't know. I don't believe a word of it. How about you, John?
So I do think it's entirely possible that ABC did not factor Brendan Carr's threats into their decision to suspend Jimmy Kimmel. But to me, that part doesn't really matter that much. The problem I have is that Carr did it in the first place. He is the head of the FCC, and he did jawbone ABC. There's no question about that. And one would think that we've been talking about the reaction to this. One would think that people who describe themselves as constitutional conservatives, or at least the people that used to, would find this totally unacceptable. Regardless if there was a causation or not. And we on the right, we used to sort of view ourselves as these noble defenders of the Constitution and the First Amendment. And it's disheartening that far too many of us have instead decided, and I've read some of the replies to this. It's too late for that. We just need to focus on owning the libs at this point. And I saw a good example of this, Bertie. I was going to read this to you from a subscriber who replied to your Monday column. in which you wrote about this topic. This is from our old buddy Thomas. We haven't heard from him in a little while. I don't know if you saw it yourself, but he wrote. I thought this
I
was
did
great.
not.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure you will, but I'll read most of it to you anyway. So he wrote, Bernie, I think this is far more complicated and nuanced than you lay out. Does Jimmy Kimmel ever have conservative voices on his show? Ever? He does not. Isn't that a form of censorship? And if you had been treated the way that Trump has been treated by the legacy media and others, wouldn't you just have a smidge of retribution in your heart? I can honestly say I would. Freedom of speech is a wonderful thing, and this is a complicated discussion, but it works two ways. And he went on, but to
Well,
me,
you know what? You know what? There's a lot of what he said that I agree with.
yeah, for sure. The first part, you're right. Conservatives don't have a home on these late night programs. But go ahead. What else were you gonna say?
Oh, well, he's right. They don't have a home. It's wrong for them to do it that way. It's wrong for the liberal media in general to censor conservatives by not giving them a voice, but it's not illegal. And it doesn't have anything to do with Brendan Carr acting like a New Jersey mob boss, trying to strong arm Disney. There are two other things that I want to talk about related to this that conservatives ought to care about. First of all, Brendan Carr and his boss, Donald Trump, should have stayed the hell out of this altogether and let the marketplace decide. Let capitalism decide. Jimmy Kimmel said something about the MAGA crowd and Charlie Kirk. You didn't like it? Don't watch. That's how you deal with. That's how conservatives ought to deal with it. And the second thing, conservatives rightly complained when liberals canceled people because they said things that the liberals didn't like. Conservatives, and I'm among them, I wrote about it, I talked about it, we rightly complained about illiberal liberals. And now we're supposed to think it's okay when conservatives want to cancel Jimmy Kimmel because he said something they didn't like? Come on. Either we have principles or we don't. And if we don't, let's stop BSing each other. I mean, come on. This is either you agree that cancel culture is wrong or you don't agree with it. But you can't say it's wrong when liberals do it, but it's okay when we do it. And also one final point, John, and then I'll give you the final word on this. We heard nothing, virtually nothing. Ted Cruz spoke up, and maybe one or two other conservatives spoke up, but we heard virtually nothing from Republicans about this. We heard virtually nothing from evangelical Christians about this. We heard nothing from Donald Trump's media pals about nothing about this. Donald Trump has gotten everybody so damn afraid of him that he's emasculated everybody. They should have said, we don't like what Jimmy Kimmel said, but we don't like your FCC chairman talking like a mafia boss and threatening ABC, Disney if they didn't do the right thing in quotation marks. And we got nothing from all these Republican and other conservatives. That's very depressing.
Yeah, no, and the reason, like you said, is that Donald Trump would prefer that people like Jimmy Kimmel be canceled. I think he prefers to have the power to be able to do that, and so people don't want to get on his wrong side. You know, as someone who, you know, a conservative writer, both of us are conservatives. We've written about this stuff for many times. It's disheartening, but to even have to repeat this. But the First Amendment isn't about equal rhetoric or being given equal time on a given platform to express opposing views. That would be the fairness doctrine, which the right was very much opposed to not all that long ago, and with very good reason. But the First Amendment is about the freedom to say what you want to say without the government punishing you for it. That includes the freedom, even if it's not a small business decision, to only talk to like-minded people, and also the freedom to upset political leaders like Donald Trump. The First Amendment is far more important than Donald Trump's feelings, than Joe Biden's feelings, than my feelings, than your, all of that. And my friends on the right, and I still consider myself on the right, used to understand that very well, and a lot of them don't anymore, and that's very troubling to me.
You nailed it. That's why you're the Renaissance man of the Rockies.
Excellent.
You nailed that. You write page turning thriller novels.
Yes.
You hike in the you're a professional hiker in the Rocky Mountains, whatever.
I would say professional.
Let's move on to James Comey's indictment. Look,
Yes.
I don't know if he's guilty of perjury. I don't know if he's guilty of obstruction of justice, but I do know a couple of things. I do know that this is retribution on Donald Trump's part, that this is vengeance, that this is getting even from a president who said he would get even by being successful. Donald Trump publicly, I mean, they don't even do this privately anymore, publicly said that Comey and others like him are guilty as hell and should be targeted. So here's a question for openers. Who's next? Is he going to go after George Soros next? The liberal big money guy? Are they going to go after Adam Schiff next, the guy I don't like and I think is dishonest? Is Trump, here's the question, the central question. Is Trump trying to get even with everybody he perceives real, correctly or incorrectly, as an enemy? Is this the beginning of something even more serious than what we've already seen? What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think it'll keep going, and it's interesting because I remember when Biden left office in those last few days, he gave pardons to people that he thought, or at least people in his administration thought, would be targets of Donald Trump. That included the January 6th committee, and I thought it was most of the people on the January 6th committee didn't seem like, if any of them, it didn't seem like they actually had asked for that, and I think some were genuinely surprised, but they kind of had this attitude, well, if you're gonna give it to us, fine. I don't know if we need it. I think at this point it does. If not for that, I think Liz Cheney would have already come under attack by Donald Trump. I think Adam Kinzinger for sure. Other people involved in that. So I think that in a way, I thought the pardons were inappropriate and unnecessary, but now maybe they were necessary to stop from causing all this extra hassle to certain individuals. But yeah, it's hard to say who's next. I mean, Chris Christie, I know Trump has said some things about it. Wouldn't be surprised if he's on the list. So I think it'll keep going in one way or
Where
another.
are the conservative voices? Where are the Republican voices saying, Mr. President, we understand your concern. We understand your frustration, but you cannot do this. You cannot go after everybody who's gone after you. They were wrong to go after you. And let me be very clear about this. Let's not pretend that this is happening out of nowhere. The district attorney in New York City went after Donald Trump in a clearly political legal attack. Letitia James, who may be another target, by the way, of Donald Trump, she went after him. She campaigned for office saying she was going to go after him and find something to charge him with. I'd be more sympathetic to liberals who are outraged at what Donald Trump is doing. When you're outraged, John, I'm not, I get it. When I'm outraged, I think it's fair. But when liberals are outraged, I'd feel a lot better if they showed outrage when their fellow Democrats were going after Donald Trump on BS charges just to get him. They showed no outrage then. So you could understand why Donald Trump is saying, you didn't show outrage when they went after me, so shut the hell up now. I'm just saying.
Yeah, you and I, Bernie, we're on the same page regarding the New York indictments. Most of them, if not all of them, were heavy on double standards, or they required some unconventional legal maneuvering. And it indeed would have been nice if leaders and media figures on the left argued as much. The other indictments, in my view, were legitimate and on very solid legal footing. But I feel the need to say that because I feel like that they have sort of been lumped in with the New York ones. When I talk about the other indictments, I'm talking about, the election interference stuff in Georgia, the obstruction of justice charges related to the classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. But I think there's a lot of people who point at the New York indictments to dismiss the non-New York indictments, and I think they
John.
lack credibility as well.
That's true, John. But you could understand Donald Trump, who's the most thin-skinned public official I think I've ever dealt with. You could understand him saying, I don't care if it was New York or Washington that indicted me. I got indicted on trumped up charges, no pun intended on the word trumped up charges. And now I'm going after them. It's wrong. Retribution like that, vengeance like that is wrong. But I understand his position, and I want liberals who were not outraged over what Democrats did. I don't care if it was New York City Democrats or New York State Democrats, what they did to Donald Trump, and now they're whining about what he's doing to them. As far as I'm concerned, you can have an opinion, John. I can have an opinion. Real conservatives can have an opinion, but liberals ought to shut up if they didn't show any outrage before.
Yeah, and I do want to say, just kind of going back to Comey, the Comey topic, I would highly recommend that people check out Andrew McCarthy's writings over at National Review on this topic. For those not familiar with him, he's a very high-profile conservative legal expert. I think he was an attorney general in New York at one point, but he always, part of his shtick is that he always does his best to defend the controversial things that Donald Trump does on purely legal grounds. And he says, and if he can't do it, he'll say so, and he says the Comey indictment is completely baseless, largely nonsensical. There's no indication that Comey perjured himself. Even if he got something wrong on the stand, that's not perjury if you believe that what you're saying is the correct account. And the odds of him being found guilty of any of this stuff is close to zero. But I think what this indictment will do is cost Comey a lot of time, a lot of money, and serve as a warning to others that they may be next, just like the stuff with John Bolton was.
Well, Donald Trump said Comey's not the end of it.
Right.
So other people are going to be in the crosshairs, and I don't think Donald Trump is going to be satisfied until he shuts up everybody who's said bad things about him, and that's something conservatives and liberals ought to be yelling about. Let me read you one last thing from the Washington Post about this, and then we can move on to another topic. Washington Post said, 8 months into his second term, Donald Trump has fulfilled his pledge to make retaliation a central feature of his presidency. He has revoked security clearances and Secret Service protection for people he doesn't like. He has issued executive orders punishing law firms he disfavored. His administration has fired attorneys who worked on cases against Trump and his supporters, while the president set those supporters free with pardons, meaning the January 6 people. To Trump and his allies, the actions are justified comeuppance for a group of deep staters and politically motivated insiders who he claimed used their power to investigate, impeach, and prosecute him and his supporters during and after his first term. I think that nails it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What Trump is doing may not be right, but it's not in a vacuum. That's all I'm saying. Not defending it. I want to be that clear. All right, let's move on to another topic. We began talking about Donald Trump and the FCC chairman and how they went after Jimmy Kimmel about how the federal government tried to censor speech they didn't like. Republicans don't have a monopoly on that kind of thing. John, you wanted to talk about how the Biden White House censored speech they didn't like.
Yeah, well, we recently learned that during the pandemic, the Biden administration pressured YouTube, which is owned by Google, to censor COVID-related content, out of a concern for what the administration believed was misinformation being given out to people. In some cases it was, in some cases it wasn't. Mark Zuckerberg said a while back that the administration did something similar with him and Facebook. It's not clear exactly what that pressure looked like, or whether or not the tech companies caved to that pressure in a meaningful way. Similar to what ABC has said, a lot of these companies are seeming to maintain this idea that the COVID censorship decisions they made were also independent. But purely from a constitutional perspective, this would seem to be at least pretty similar to the situation with Trump and Jimmy Kimmel. I think the Biden administration probably has a better moral argument for what they did. They weren't doing it for Biden's ego. They were doing it because they believed bad information was going out. But I don't think they have a better constitutional argument. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I totally agree with you. And when the federal government makes suggestions. That's like, let's go back to the mafia analogy. The mafia guy walks into your bar, as Ted Cruz said in his podcast, and he says, "You have a nice bar here. Be a shame if something terrible happened to it." Well, when the federal government, Biden administration in this case, goes to the social media sites and says, you know, we really think we're not ordering you to do anything, but we're making a suggestion that you take this off your website. Don't let these people have their views because they're wrong views. They're not good for the country views. That's not a suggestion. That's a strong arm, and it's wrong.
And it's the only part that I'm a little confused with Brendan Carr. We know exactly what he says. I would be curious to see what the Biden administration, how they talked to these social media companies, because that hasn't been clear. And I recently, just a few days ago, I interviewed on a different podcast. I interviewed Matt Lewis. You're familiar with him, Bernie?
Yeah.
He's a conservative guy. He was sort of coming at this from the perspective of, look, he was thinking about what if this pandemic had happened during the 80s, at a time when there's really the three major networks, or where people got their news primarily. You were working for one of those networks, and he said, how would we react if a president, behind the scenes, kind of spoke to the executives of these three networks and say, we have this health crisis. We really want to make it clear that this is bad information. Would be dangerous if people believe this stuff. How would you react to that? I'm curious, Bernie, because it may have been like that. I don't know what exactly how.
The government comes to us at CBS News and says, we just want to alert you to the fact that this information is wrong. It's factually, scientifically wrong. Do what you will with it. Fair enough. But if they put any pressure on, if they imply things, if you read between the lines and they're making threats, that crosses a line. That's how I see it.
Okay. Yeah, and it would be great. I wish these companies would be a little bit more specific about what that looked like, because maybe it's not as bad as what it potentially could have been, but I'm not sure we have the answers on that.
One more thing that's not on our list before we go.
Sure.
Skydance Media bought Paramount, which owns CBS and CBS News. We're going to see big changes in about a month. I don't know what they are, except that I think a lot of heads are going to roll at CBS News. And I'm throwing this out at you, John. If you have an opinion, fine. If you don't, we'll just say goodbye to everybody.
Okay.
Skydance wants to buy Discovery Warner, which owns CNN. Let's say Brendan Carr signs off on it, or the Federal Trade Commission, or whoever it is, the federal government, Donald Trump's federal government, signs off on it. That means CBS News and CNN News will be owned by the same people. CNN has bureaus all around the world. CBS, not so much anymore. The new owners aren't going to need two news organizations covering the same planet. I think they're going to have CNN cover the world, and they'll have a CBS anchor doing the evening news, but there won't be any CBS News people anymore. Maybe not literally 100%, but I think CBS News, Ed Murrow's not coming back in the door. Walter Cronkite's not coming back in. Dan Rather isn't even coming back in. But I think the changes we're going to see are going to be enormous. The only issue I want to make about the word enormous is that network news is no big deal anymore to begin with. So any enormous changes aren't going to be all that enormous in the big scheme of things, because network television is an idea who's come and gone. Network news, by 6:30 at night Eastern time, everybody knows what the big stories are. They've heard it all day on other media. But a lot of people at CBS News, at my alma mater, are going to be out of work in about a month. Michael,
Entirely possible. I haven't thought about that until you brought that up. For some reason, and maybe I'm wrong on this. I had maybe this belief that there was already some sort of business relationship between CBS News and CNN. Maybe it's because Anderson Cooper has the CNN show and then he goes
no,
over
no,
to 60 Minutes
no, yeah, they have that, and the doctors, Sanjay Gupta does some pieces for 60 Minutes, but
Mhm.
no, CNN doesn't cover the news for CBS News.
Yeah, okay. I thought maybe there was something linked there, but it'll be. And you've been making that point for a long time that the network evening news it was a huge part of how Americans got their news. A couple of decades back even, and it's just different now. And it's yeah, I don't know. I mean, see, I can't. I imagine CNN will continue on in a way that's not entirely different from
CNN will.
yeah, but not CBS News, right? That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, look, let's say you, John Daly, because I don't want to know how much money you have, but I'm guessing you have a few $1 billion,
Exactly.
and you bought CBS News and you bought CNN, let's say.
Yeah.
Do you want two news organizations with that payroll of each one when you can have just one of them covering the news and the cheaper one, CNN, covering the news, and you have an anchor person who you're not paying millions of dollars to, but maybe a few 100,000, and CNN covers the news, and you have an anchor fronting a CBS evening newscast, just fronting it. By the way, here's something I'm revealing that nobody knows. A certain person whose name, I'll tell you the name in a second, a certain famous person in the media was at CBS News the other day doing what I'm told was called a screen test, meaning seeing how it works on camera. You know who it was?
I can guess, but I probably got. Is it Bill O'Reilly?
No, I
Oh,
would have I would have guessed that too.
oh,
Megyn Kelly was at CBS News the other day. You heard it here. You're not going to hear it anyplace else. And
interesting.
if she's on the new CBS News staff, I'm not going to be shocked. I don't know in what capacity, but I wouldn't be shocked.
I think I would be actually because she's
Why?
so I've been friendly with Megyn Kelly for quite some time. We haven't talked in a while, but it's she's changed a lot in recent years in a
Exactly,
way.
John. Exactly, John. And the new owners have publicly said we want more varied voices at CBS News.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because I was gonna say the way she's changed I think would be even harder for a major network to want her to work for them, but
Oh,
maybe not. If
oh,
everything's getting mixed up,
in the old days, you'd be absolutely right.
right?
There's no way in the world the old CBS News would have hired Megyn Kelly. But
Yeah.
the old days are the old days.
Yeah,
So
I mean, if it really is that big of a change, I guess maybe we should. There's a lot of surprising things that we will see.
Bari Weiss is going to be a big player at CBS News in the next few days, I think, certainly in the next few weeks.
Yep.
It's going to be a different CBS News, but I don't think it's going to matter to a lot of. Listen, let me end with this. Michael Jordan was once asked to endorse a Democratic Senate candidate, and he famously said he didn't do it, and he famously said Republicans buy sneakers too. That is the philosophy, I think. Republicans watch TV news too. They watch late night shows too. So let's stop keeping conservatives and Republicans out of the news shows or the late night shows. Let's have more voices. And I think the new owners are going to bring in a Bari Weiss for a new voice, maybe a Megyn Kelly for a new voice, maybe. And I think you're not going to have the same liberal monotone that we've had in the past.
It'll be interesting to see. I think it's worth a try. I mean, it's you've been talking about the need for change. Not specifically to CBS, but that was a big part of your narrative, having worked there for so long. You've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it's definitely worth a try. I think it's definitely worth appealing to audiences that they've sort of haven't been trying to appeal to for a long time. And yeah, it'll be. I'm all for it. I'm all for them mixing things up.
So let me end with a TV term. Stay tuned. We'll know more next time. All right, that's it for this edition of the No BS Zone. The Renaissance man in the Colorado Rockies, John Daly, keeps this thing going. I keep saying, tell your friends, and you never do it. So what am I going to do? Insult you?
I got to give Bernie.
Subscribers. We love having you around. Tell your friends, come on, get a subscription for your uncle who doesn't like liberals, or your cousin who hates conservatives. I mean, come on, we need as many people tuned in as possible. It gives us more influence.
I got to say, Bernie, before we go, I got to give props. I don't think I mentioned this to you. The Emperor, our buddy, the Emperor, he has been out there doing gift subscriptions for friends. He's been coming through. So when we say nobody's been,
the Emperor, you are the only Emperor we have here, and you rule over a land of loyal people. So sign them up, Emperor. Sign them up.
Well done, Emperor.
Okay. See you next time, everybody.